Let's see, I hope everything is perfect. All right, so we are live on YouTube. Let me quickly share this on Facebook. Okay, let me go here. All right, I guess everybody, I mean, quite a few people are online. I am just going to say that give me 1 minute. I'm just working with the settings and we should be okay within a moment. Okay. All right. Okay, so we are live on YouTube and everything seems to be perfect. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, please comment. If you can comment and just let me know if you can hear me clearly and if the sound and the video feed is working properly. Just comment on YouTube and that I'll know, and we can continue with it here. All right, so it's all good on YouTube, perfectly done. Okay, so as I said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever or whatever time zone you are in and from wherever you're watching. I know right now quite a few people are going to break their fast. I know in different countries it's time to break fast, so hopefully they can watch it later on. This is a series called Research Review, and in this series what I do is I invite different type of scholars to talk about different issues related to research. Today we have a very special guest. He's a very close friend and a brother to me, called Dr. Mostafa Rasoolimanesh, who is currently residing in Malaysia, and he is working as an associate professor at Taylor's University in the School of Hospitality, Taylor's University, Malaysia. Dr. Mostafa is a seasoned researcher. He has published extensively. He is also serving on multiple editorial boards of different journals. Plus, he is the special issue assistant editor for special issues for Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Technology. Dr. Mostafa has also served as guest editor for multiple special issues. In fact, I'm very lucky to have him on a couple of my papers related to PLS and methodology. Plus, both me and Dr. Mostafa have guest edited a special issue for PLS and hospitality and tourism. And we also did a book on PLS and hospitality and tourism. So Normally what happens is my Facebook, I get a lot of messages and a lot of questions from different type of scholars, from students about mediation, moderation, other methods as well. So I talked to Dr. Mostafa and asked him if he would be, kind enough to accept my invitation to come and talk about mediation and moderation and answer some of the questions that people have. And he is very kind and gracious to, accept my invitation. And today he is with us to answer some of the questions. Now, of course, what we can do is if you have any questions, please make sure you post your questions on YouTube now in live session so that it's easier for me to track the questions and ask them. I also advertised this session like 5-6 days ago, so I got quite a bunch of questions. So we'll start with those questions, Dr. Mostafa, if you are okay. And I mean, while we are doing this, I'll also track the questions on YouTube so that we can pick up questions from YouTube and answer them. Is that okay? Okay. Before we get into mediation and moderation, I want you to tell us a little bit about your research areas and what is it that you are working on these days. Just maybe a minute or two. What are some of the researches you are working on?
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. President, for inviting me for this live session. Hopefully the audience can benefit from this live session and learn something about mediation and moderation. And also, of course, I will learn something from their question. Thank you for your nice introduction. And actually, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening based on wherever you are. I'm Dr. Mostafa from School of Hospitality, Tourism and Events, Taylor's University. My research area focus more on sustainable tourism, heritage tourism, and community tourism. And actually, another way and another direction of my research is advanced quantitative data analysis technique like partial least squares structural equation modeling. So in most of my paper focus on these two areas, focus on from the content, focus on sustainable tourism and heritage tourism, and methodology focus more on advanced quantitative analysis technique.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mostafa. So, okay, let's get into it. Okay, so before I go and ask you questions about mediation and moderation, how about you tell us in very easy words, what do we mean by mediation and what do we mean by moderation?
Okay, this is a very good start. Actually, if you look at the Baron and Kenny's seminal work in 1986, and these two scholars and their work try to solve this confusion between moderator and mediator. So it means at that time, there was some confusion about the application of these two concepts. What's the meaning of mediator and what's the meaning of moderator? Actually, in simple word, the mediator is some variable in our framework that intervene between two other variables, or in other words, transmit the effect of independent variable to dependent variable. So in very simple word, mediation actually identify the mechanism of effect of IV on DV. Sometimes the effect of IV on DV is not direct effect. And there's something between IV and DV to transfer this effect. So this is the role of mediation. Very simple word, right? But moderator and moderation is different. Moderator, actually, when we have a moderator for effect of an IV to DV, for the relationship between two variables, IV and DV, it means for different levels of moderator, this effect, we assume this effect is different. So let's say for moderator, we have two levels, high and low levels. For example, our moderator is satisfaction. So we have two levels of satisfaction, high satisfaction and low satisfaction. So between independent variable and dependent variable, this effect is different for high level and low level of satisfaction. So this is the meaning, simple meaning of moderator. But actually for mediator and moderator, we will talk later. We need to actually hypothesize in correct way, moderator and mediator. And actually we need to apply correct method for assessment of mediator and moderator. So this is main issue in application of mediator and moderator, but later we can discuss about these two main issue and actually important issue about mediator and moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mostafa. Very easy explanation. I love it the way you explain it, and I guess it would be clearer for many people because, you know, I normally go to different universities, and it's very interesting that how people use these fancy words, mediator, moderator, and many people associate these words with sort of contribution. So, you know, and unfortunately, many supervisors are also doing this, asking students to add a mediator or a moderator in the model to make it more complicated, whereas there's no understanding of what is mediator and what is a moderator. So because you said that you have to hypothesize it, right? So I will ask you one other question here. Can we just go ahead and add something in the model and call it a mediator or a moderator, or do we have to really bring theory or literature to support that mediator or moderator?
Yeah, for actually application of mediator and moderator, like other hypotheses in our framework and model, we need to support the mediator and moderator by theory. But let me separately explain for mediator and moderator, because there are some underlying for each one, how we need to apply theory to support mediator and moderator, and how can we hypothesize mediator and moderator. I would like to start with the mediator. As I explained, mediator is something that transmits the effect of IV to DV, right? So if we have one IV, simple mediator, we have one IV, one mediator, and one DV, right? So how can we hypothesize this simple mediator in our model? Okay. Later, I will explain how we assess mediator. There are something controversial for assessment of mediator. For assessment of mediator, we have different methods, but later I will discuss about methods for assessment, statistical method for assessment of mediator. But now, just want to talk about hypothesis development, right? I'm sure you and many of our audience heard about Baron and Kinney approach. Yeah, Baron and Kinney approach is one of the first approach for assessment of mediator. Baron and Kinney approach for assessment of mediator is actually a causal step, called causal step. So there is no any test for assessment of mediator based on Baron and Kinney. So we have some steps for assessment, right? So this is one of the method for assessment of mediator. And the recent literature actually identify and reveal that this method for assessment of mediator is not a powerful method, and it's a method with very low power in analysis, right? I understand this one, and later I will discuss what method for assessment of mediator we prefer. But I want to use Baron and Kinney definition and Baron and Kinney understanding for hypothesizing mediator. Actually, I think still Baron and Kinney approach is useful and applicable for hypothesizing mediator. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about statistical assessment of mediator. This is another thing. But for hypothesizing mediator, I believe still we can follow Baron and Kenny. What does it mean? In Baron and Kenny, we have a few steps. In Baron and Kenny, we need to make sure for a relationship or effect of IV on DV. It means total effect before including mediator. And we need the effect of IV on mediator and mediator on DV. Based on Baron and Kenny approach, for assessment of mediator, we need to test significance of these different steps, right? Okay, but I'm not talking about statistical assessment. For hypothesizing mediator, these 3 steps is very good benchmark for hypothesizing mediator. What does it mean? It means when we have a mediator and we want to hypothesize, we need to support some steps for hypothesizing mediator. We need to support effect of IV on DV based on literature and based on theory. For example, if we want to hypothesize mediation role of satisfaction between attitude and intention, attitude and loyalty, for example, right? So we want to test this indirect effect through satisfaction. How we hypothesize this indirect effect? To hypothesize this indirect effect, we need to support effect of attitude on loyalty. It means we need a theory to support this total effect of IV on DV from actually theoretical perspective, not statistical perspective. And we need to support by theory and literature effect of IV on on mediator and effect of mediator on DV. So if we want to hypothesize mediation role of satisfaction between attitude and loyalty, and we want to say attitude has indirect effect on loyalty through satisfaction, we need to provide some support, theoretical support, established theory and empirical studies for effect of attitude on satisfaction, for effect of attitude on loyalty, and for effect of satisfaction on loyalty. So if we provide these theoretical support and empirical study, then we can hypothesize indirect effect of attitude on loyalty through satisfaction. So this is for development of mediation hypothesis, right? So I believe still Baron and Kenny understanding is valid, but only for hypothesizing mediator, not for statistical assessment of mediator. So in summary, if we want to hypothesize, we need theory and we need the empirical studies, both, and the theory and empirical studies should support the effect of IV on DV, effect of IV on mediator, and effect of mediator on DV. We recently published a paper in Journal of Travel Research. We assess mediation role of resident perception between some antecedent and support for tourism development. And the focus of this paper is assessment of mediation. We apply 2 different theory, Weber theory and social exchange theory. exactly we apply this theory for this relationship that I mentioned. So based on this theory and this relationship, we hypothesize mediation role of resident perception between antecedent and support for tourism development. So this is for mediator.
Okay, so again, very good explanation. To summarize, what you mean is that many people are criticizing Barron and Kenny, but that criticism should only be limited to statistical significance of mediation, not the theoretical understanding of mediation. So before you do data analysis, when you are developing your model or when you are developing your theory, at that time you should have an understanding of Barron and Kenny's steps of mediation so that you can hypothesize it. But later,
Baron and Kenny actually is very good benchmark for hypothesizing mediation.
And then later when you are
statistical assessment,
right, when you are analyzing it, then you can go with Preacher and Hayes or bootstrapping methods.
Yeah, other approach that I will
other approaches. Okay, then we can talk about that later. Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Mostafa. Very, very good explanation. Well, this is not a question, but it just hit my mind, and I'm going to ask you. Sometimes what happens is that you are coming up with a very new approach, something that is not existing in the literature or very limited support from the literature for whatever you want to propose. So in that type of case, if you don't really have strong support from the literature about mediation or indirect effect of some variables, how do you do that? Can you use
okay.
Yeah. Can you use some similar concepts, or can you just go ahead and say that I want to test this? How to deal with that type of situation?
Actually, no need to have previous study exactly about mediation, right? So as I explained, we need to support some relationship. We need to support by theory effect of IV on DV, right? So of course we can get idea from other discipline and support from other disciplines, some theory that work for attitude. Now we are working in hospitality or tourism, but we can get some support from theory in consumer behavior. So we can get those theory to support relationship between IV and DV, and IV and mediator and DV. So no need to have exactly indirect effect or mediator in the literature, either in our discipline or other discipline. But we need to have some sort of support for effect, because actually it's not meaningful that we want to develop mediator and indirect effect of IV on DV, but also we don't have any support for the effect of attitude on loyalty. So we need some sort of support from theoretical perspective and also from empirical study, previous study.
Okay. Now I see that there are a couple of questions about finding the appropriate theory, which you already explained. But I'm going to ask you one more thing, and then we can go ahead with some questions. So let's say that we have two variables, IV and DV, right? And the findings are inconclusive, means some of the studies say that the IV is impacting the DV, or some of the studies say that the IV is not impacting the DV. There's inconclusive findings. In that type of situation, do we have to add a mediator in order to test it, or do we have to add a moderator to test it? What is your suggestion based on your experience?
It depends on, actually it depends on your objective and the context of your study. We cannot say you can add mediator and moderator. Actually, sometimes when we have a controversial result, and in some study, the effect of IV on DV is supported and another study is not supported. This can be because of heterogeneity of this effect. If, for example, for some group, this effect is positive, and for another group, this effect is negative. So if we have we have this type of situation, including a moderator can be very useful, because when we include moderator, we can differentiate between this effect for two groups, for group 1 and group 2, for male and female, for big companies and small companies. So the effect for big companies is positive, but the effect for small companies is negative. So when we combine these two together, the effect is not significant. But when we differentiate for moderator, the effect will be significant for these two, but the effect will be opposite, right? One will be negative and one be, for example, positive. So for this case, including moderator is very useful. For another case, sometimes maybe including mediator is useful and can help. Sometimes we know effect of IV on DV, but actually we don't know mechanism. So if we can find some variable that explain this mechanism, by including this variable, by including this mediator, we can explain, we can clarify mechanism of effect of IV on DV. For example, there is a very good and simple example on, I think Hare's book, is about number of seawater temperature and number of incidents. So in some studies, there are some positive effects for seawater temperature and number of incidents. But it's not meaningful. Why seawater temperature should influence on number of incidents? But if we put a variable between these two, number of swimmers, so this will explain this effect and the mechanism of this effect. Weather temperature, increased number of swimmers, increasing number of swimmers will increase number of incidents. So in this case, so of course, if we put mediator, can explain mechanism of this effect. So it depends on our study and our objective and the nature of our work.
Right. You bring a very good point. You know, I have seen a couple, because I have studied for my PhD in Malaysia, and what I realized was that sometimes what happens is you test a model and some of your hypotheses are not supported, right? Or sometimes all the hypotheses are not supported. And in that type of situation, the students are really very stressed, because normally what happens is that the supervisors or examiners look at students if the students are the culprits or if they have committed a crime because all the hypotheses are not supported. But you bring a very good point that sometimes when you are collecting data, your data set have heterogeneous groups in the data, but you don't realize it, right? Like, for example, shopping. I mean, I do not enjoy shopping at all. I mean, I go and buy whatever is there, right? But then my wife loves shopping. Like, you know, she would spend hours in a mall, which is normally typical behavior for male and female, right? So let's say if you are testing the impact of shopping time on shopping enjoyment, and you collect data from male and female, which are two distinct groups, maybe your hypothesis is not supported, not significant. And the reason might be because of male and female, like the gender, right?
Yeah,
so they are both cutting it off. So if you have a moderator, to compare male and female, then you may have more interesting findings to talk about in your implication section. So it's a very good strategy.
No, we didn't explain hypothesis of moderator. Let me very briefly explain also about the moderator. For moderator, as I explained, we have two different situations. And we want to compare effect of IV and DV effect or relationship between two variables for these two levels of, for example, these two levels of variable between male and female, or high and for big and small companies, right? So when we want to hypothesize, still we need theory. And we have to support our hypothesis by theory and by empirical studies. So we cannot escape in quantitative research. We cannot escape for any type of hypothesis, we cannot escape theory and support from the literature, right? So for moderator, for example, between male and female, when we want to hypothesize, a good way of writing hypothesis for moderator, in some studies say just, for example, attitude as gender, moderate relationship between attitude and loyalty. But this is a way for writing moderator, but it's not good way. If we want to write hypothesis for moderator, it's good based on literature and based on theory, write one-tail hypothesis and identify the effect is stronger or weaker for which one, right? So for the effect of attitude on loyalty is stronger for female compared to male. So this is, and we need to support this difference between male and female for this relationship by theory. How we can support based on literature this difference. So for writing a moderator also for similar to other hypotheses, we need the support by theory and
right. Now, Dr. Mostafa, when I review papers, right, sometimes I come across something which is very interesting. So what you just said, male, female, large size companies, small size companies, these are categorical variables. You have categories, right, in these variables. Sometimes it's easier to do moderation because, like you said, you compare mean scores or, path coefficients or beta value for both of these categories and then see which one is better than the other one. But then sometimes you have variables like, let's say, personal innovativeness, which is not a categorical variable, it's a continuous variable, right? So I have seen that many people, what they do is they take a continuous variable and convert it into a categorical variable based on mean score, like low innovativeness, high innovativeness. Do you think it's a good practice to do that?
Actually, for continuous variable, it's better to use, especially when we want to assess effect of moderator in one or two path coefficient or relationship in our framework. It's better to use interaction effect. So actually, for assessment of moderator, we have two main categories, but both are assessment of moderator. One is the interaction effect. Interaction effect, actually, we create interaction effect between independent variable and moderator and assess this interaction effect. If this interaction effect significant, means relationship between IV and DV will be different for two levels of moderator, for high and low level of moderator, right? So based on this interaction effect. So means when level of moderator increase, if interaction effect is significant and positive, right? Positive, it means effect of IV on DV will be stronger when moderator increase. But if effect of interaction is negative, significant and negative, it means this effect of IV on DV is weaker for higher level of moderator. So when moderator increase, the relationship between IV and DV will decrease, right? So this is a more suitable and preferred approach for continuous variable. But if we have categorical variable, categorical like dichotomous variable, like gender, like big and small companies, right? So when we have categorical variable, it's better to use multigroup analysis. So in multigroup analysis, we split our sample to different groups and group 2. So run model based on group 1 and group 2 and compare path coefficient based on some methods. There are some methods for comparison between path coefficient, right? Between beta coefficient. So we apply some method for this comparison for assessment of multigroup analysis. But we should be very careful for application of the method for this assessment, because actually the term of A minus B, A minus B, A is one path coefficient, B is a path coefficient for another group. A minus B is the difference between two path coefficients, right? This term is non-parametric term. So for assessment of significance of these non-parametric term, we have to use non-parametric approach.
Mhm.
So when we apply multi-group analysis, we should be very careful for application of method, and method should be non-parametric.
Mhm.
This is also happen for mediation assessment. Where we will go back to mediation assessment, and we'll see what's the criticism for Baron and Kenny approach. Actually, the problem is here, like similar to A minus B. A minus B is term of multi-group analysis. But for mediation analysis, the term is A multiply B.
Mhm.
So indirect effect is A multiply B.
Mhm.
A multiply B is non-parametric.
Mhm.
So we have to apply non-parametric method for testing significance of this product of coefficient or this term.
Mhm.
So later we will be back to mediator assessment, but
Okay.
for mediator we have two: interaction
Okay.
effect and multi-group analysis.
Multi-group. Okay, now for multi-group analysis, we will be using it only if we are checking the differences for the entire model, right? So if you have a whole model and you have 6, 7 hypotheses, and you want to test that for male and female, then you go for multi-group analysis. But let's say
Yes.
if you are only testing 1 out of 7 hypotheses for male and female, right? Then do you still go with multi-group analysis, or do you go with...
It's up to you. It's up to you. Actually, you can go for even for dichotomous variable and categorical variable. You can go for interaction effect.
Mhm.
So we can apply interaction effect.
Okay.
So if you only want to test moderator in one relationship or one effect, so you can still apply interaction effect for categorical variable.
Okay. One other thing in MGA, because we are talking about multi-group analysis, so I just remember one other thing somebody posted on Facebook as a question. When I review papers, right, this is I've seen, when I review papers, I've seen recently some people apply multi-group analysis, but they directly apply multi-group analysis without checking the invariance. Okay, so what do you think about this? Because if I am hypothesizing that there is a difference for my model in 2 groups, before I go and check that, do we have to do something like MICOM or
Yes.
invariance?
Of course, you need to check measurement invariance. Actually, measurement invariance is to check that your measurement model for these 2 groups are invariant.
Mhm.
If your measurement model for group 1 and group 2 are not invariant, it means the difference between path coefficient also can come from difference in measurement level, not in structural level.
Mhm.
So before going to assessment of difference in structural level, you need to make sure invariance of your measurement model.
Mhm.
So measurement model, measurement invariance is a must before MGA. But for measurement invariance, many different methods have been applied and recommended in the literature as parametric method, permutation, and other method. And actually recently for composite, especially for composite model and composite-based approach like PLS, MICOM measurement invariance for composite was proposed and recommended by Hensler and his colleagues. And this is a non-parametric approach for assessment of invariant measurement invariance, and is suitable for composite-based approach like PLS.
Mhm.
So we need to apply, we need to test measurement invariance before going for MGA.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mostafa. There's a question here. It says that, please confirm if we have categorical variables, then we use MGA. Is it the same as testing moderation?
Exactly. MGA and MGA is under umbrella of moderation.
Mhm.
Under umbrella of moderation, we have 2 main categories: interaction effect and the multi-group analysis. So both are different methods for testing moderator, right?
Mhm.
Oh, MGA also is moderation assessment.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now, two more questions that are very common and many people ask this. Can we have a mediator and a moderator in the same model? Plus,
Yes.
can the same variable work as a mediator and a moderator?
Actually, when we have moderated mediator, sorry, mediated moderator, when we have mediated moderator, we have same variable that play two roles, moderator and mediator in one framework. But play a role of moderator for one relationship and mediator for another relationship, another IV and DV. So possible, why not? In the literature, we have many different papers that apply mediator and moderator, and one variable play these two roles in our framework.
Okay, thank you. Now, for those of you who want to know about mediated moderator or moderated mediator, I did another video with Dr. Francis, who is from University of Uttar, Malaysia, another good friend and another very well-established scholar in PLS. So that's on my channel. You can watch it. It's in detail only about moderated mediation and mediated moderation. So you can learn something from there. Okay, let's move to the next question. All right. Can second order latent construct serve as a mediator or a moderator?
Yes, of course, because actually first order and second order, we assess and talk in the measurement level. But mediator and moderator, we are in a structural level. So before going to a structural level, we need to sort out all things about measurement level, right? When we have a second order in measurement level, when we have second order in IV, DV, or mediator and moderator, before assessment of mediator and moderator, we need to assess measurement model. And we need to establish second order. So establish second order. So we will use this second order for as a mediator, as a moderator, and we will apply different methods like first order for assessment of this mediator or moderator.
All right, perfect. So now endogeneity. Okay, a couple of people ask questions about endogeneity of a mediator. Dr. Mostafa, if you don't mind, can you just very quick in one or two sentences tell us what is endogeneity and can we test endogeneity for a mediator?
Actually, endogeneity is happen in our framework when we have correlation between one or more than one of antecedent and the error term or residual of endogenous variable. So when we have correlation between some antecedent and the error term, endogeneity will happen, right? And this is not only for mediator or dependent variable. Endogenous variable can happen. And there are some paper in the literature how we can deal with the endogeneity of endogenous variable. My very good friend, Prof. Roldan and Prof. Gabriel Cepeda, I think a few years ago, they published a paper about endogeneity and how can deal with endogeneity. So good paper to refer if we want to apply in our model and actually deal with and solve the problem of endogeneity in our framework.
Okay, perfect. So again, endogeneity is not a problem specific to mediation. It can apply to any model where you have more than one independent variable, more than one endogenous variable, and the correlation between them, if it's high, it creates endogeneity. But you said the paper is done by Professor Roldan and Cepeda. That is a very good paper, actually, if anybody wants to understand mediation in general. plus endogeneity. It's a very good paper. I've read it also.
Actually, they have one very good paper for mediation assessment and one for endogeneity. Many other good papers that they have. But the endogeneity and you're right, for mediator, they wrote a paper with Christian Nitzel that is good paper for assessment of mediator. When we have time, I want to actually go back to assessment of mediator, because
yes.
theoretical part, and we haven't discussed the statistical assessment of mediator, Barn and Kenny, and other approaches.
Yes, we are almost done with moderators, so we are going to move to mediators. But just one thing, those of you who have issues with this mediation or whatever, and if you want to talk to Professor Roldan and Sapeda, they are both very active on Facebook, actually. They have a group called PLS EN Espinol. So, and they're very active, very approachable. So you can join that group, and if you have any questions, you can reach out, and I'm pretty sure that they will be very happy to answer. Very approachable guys, both of them. Okay, so let's move to mediation now. First of all, there's a very interesting question, and I think you did touch upon this question earlier, but let's see how do you go with this question. There's no consensus regarding mediation approaches, right? So there are multiple approaches: Barron and Kenny, Spencer, Collins, Preacher and Hayes, whatever. How do we know which one is the best approach and which one should we go with?
Okay, can I share my screen? Because
yes,
I want to go through some slides, and maybe it's more useful for audience.
Okay, you can share now. Yes.
Okay. Now, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it. Let me ask those of you who are on YouTube, please just comment if you can see the screen. Then that way we will be sure that everything is working properly.
All right, is it okay?
Yes, it's okay. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Lubna.
Actually, this is a very, very interesting discussion. Addition to the first discussion that we had for hypothesizing the mediator, I explained that for hypothesizing mediator, still different steps of Barron and Kenny can be valid, but not for a statistical assessment. Actually, for a statistical assessment of the mediator, we have many different tests, many different statistical approach to test mediator. McKinnon et al. 2002, they review and summarize 14 tests for assessment of the mediator, but only the tests that they summarize in their paper, and categorize under 3 different groups. First group is causal steps, like Barron and Kenny. We have some steps that by checking these steps, we conclude that this variable is it mediator or not, right? But this is for Barron and Kenny, we don't have any test. We don't check significance of anything, right? Just we have some steps. Another group is differences of direct coefficient before and after inclusion of the mediator. This is second group of approach. There are some approach under this group. And the last one, the third group, is product of coefficient. Actually, this group, we look at significance of indirect effect. A multiply B, indirect effect. So we look at this term for third group, right? For the third group of approach. But under third group, we have many different tests. Delta method, percentile and bias corrected bootstrap, confidence interval, distribution of product, Monte Carlo, joint significance. We have different approach under product of coefficient. And you heard a lot about Sobel test. Sobel test is one approach under product of coefficient. So using Sobel test, we test significance of indirect effect. We also have another approach like Orion test, Goodman test. Based on this test, also we check significance of indirect effect, right? Okay, under third category. But there is one simulation study by Hayes and Schwarzkopf, 2013. And in this simulation study, they assess some approach under these three groups. And based on simulation, their conclusion is Baron and Kenny is very, very low power approach for statistically assessment of mediator. They actually concluded best in these three categories, best one is product of coefficient. But also under product of coefficient, some tests like Sobel test is very least reliable and trustworthy based on this simulation. So they didn't suggest using Sobel test and some tests like Sobel test. Here you can see some example of them for assessment of significance of, for testing significance of indirect effect or product of coefficient. Based on their simulation, they suggest the best method for assessment of significance of indirect effect is bias corrected bootstrap confidence interval or percentile bootstrap confidence interval. So these two methods, among all methods under three categories, are best two methods for statistically assessment of mediator. So they suggested to apply these two methods for assessment of mediator. This is very good diagram from Zhao et al. 2010. And Nitzel et al. 2016 also used this framework. Mm-hmm. This framework is based on product of coefficient and indirect effect. So we assess indirect effect for assessment of mediator. Mm-hmm. If indirect effect is not significant, means we don't have mediator. Mm-hmm. If indirect effect is significant, regardless of significance of direct effect before and after inclusion of mediator, regardless of this one. If indirect effect is significant, it means we have mediator. Mm-hmm. So only significance of indirect effect using bias corrected confidence interval or percentile confidence interval, we can confirm mediation effect. But mediation effect based on Zhao, we have two types of mediation, not no longer partial and full mediation. When we assess indirect effect, we don't talk and we don't assess full and partial mediation. Only we have two types of mediation. If sign of indirect effect, AB, sign of indirect effect is identical with sign of direct effect after inclusion of mediator. So the sign of AB and C' are same. Mm-hmm. These two paths or mediation is complementary. Mediation complement direct effect. So we have direct and indirect effect, both. If the sign of direct effect and indirect effect are opposite, mm-hmm. one is negative, one is positive. So mediator is competitive. Oh. Mediator and direct effect compete for effect of IV on DV. Oh. So based on this approach, using product of coefficient and also using bootstrapping, bias corrected bootstrapping, we have two types of mediator, competitive and complementary, based on this mediator. So this is very good figure that based on we can identify mediation effect and also we can interpret mediation effect.
Okay, Dr. Mustafa, it's very interesting what you just said. But before that, a couple of people asked, if you don't mind, can you send me these 3 or 4 slides, the one that you
Yes,
just
yes, I
explained?
will.
And
I
then
will
those
send.
of you who ask about it, if you can check later today or maybe tomorrow, I'll add a link to these 3 or 4 slides so you can access these slides. Not obviously all of them, but just those 3 or 4 about mediation.
Yeah, yeah.
So that way you'll have access. But let me come back to this one point that you brought, which is a very interesting point, because I see that many people are confused about it. And that is, let's say if you are looking at 2 variables, let's say how service quality impacts loyalty, and then you add, let's say, price value as a mediator. Okay,
Yes,
then if you look at the direct effect of service quality on loyalty, if the beta or the sign is plus, like plus value, after mediation, the indirect is negative. That means that the price and service quality are competing with each other in terms of
yes,
predicting loyalty,
exactly,
right? But if the
exactly.
sign is positive, then it means they are complementing each other in
Yeah.
predicting loyalty. Very
And
interesting.
actually, very, very interesting for interpretation of this effect. For example, when we have this price as a mediator for this effect, and both are positive,
Mhm.
you can compare indirect effect and direct effect
Mm.
and see the effect of service quality on loyalty. Most of this effect effect of service quality on loyalty go directly to service quality or go through price.
Mhm.
And the interpretation sometimes is very interesting, right? The service quality influence on, for example, perceived value, and perceived value influence on loyalty, or service quality can directly influence on loyalty. So if all effect go through perceived value, or the effect of indirect effect through perceived value is much stronger than direct effect, means perceived value play a very critical role
Mhm.
for the effect of service quality on loyalty.
Perfect. So those of you who are listening, and if you are working on anything related to mediation, especially PhD students, please note this down. This is a very interesting insight, that if the sign changes, then because something like this can really help you write your implications when you are writing your implications, especially practical implications, right? Because industry would be very interested to know in this, that sometimes you add variables from theoretical perspective as a mediator, but then your analysis might put them as a complementary or a competitive variable in terms of predicting the dependent variable. Very interesting insight again. Okay, Dr. Mustafa, the time is limited, so I'm going to run into a couple of more very important questions that I see. One is, what do we mean by serial mediation? Well, yeah, we already understand mediation is where it's clarifying the path of the relationship. What is serial mediation, and how do we interpret it?
Okay, I have serial mediation is some okay here. This is the meaning of serial mediator. M and W, right?
Mhm.
Serial mediator. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. M and W, we have two different variable here, that X effect on M effect on W, and W effect on Y. So effect of X on Y transferred through both M and W. So here we have serial mediator. For example, recently we are working on a paper for a dimension of perceived value,
Mhm.
social value and emotional value, right? And actually we identified that emotional value, functional, social, and emotional value. And we identified functional value influence on emotional, and emotional influence on loyalty or some behavioral intention variable. So these two variables can be serial mediator. So the effect of IV transfer to DV through two or more than one mediator. So here we have, in this case, we have serial mediator. But for this one, we have parallel mediator. If we have two parallel mediator, that the effect of X transfer to Y through two different variables, that these two variables are parallel and together transfer the effect of X to Y. So we call this one parallel mediator. Interpretation is similar to mediator. So we need to explain effect of assessment of interpretation and also hypothesis development. We need to we need to follow different steps to hypothesize and to support by theory for the relationship for serial or parallel mediator. And also for assessment of mediator, we look at indirect effect using bootstrapping for assessment of indirect effect for serial or parallel mediator.
Okay, perfect. So two more questions very quickly. One is, again, it goes back to, different methods of explaining mediation. And that one says that we normally use the VAF for testing mediation, full, partial, or no mediation, right? Which supports on Smart PLS or any other software. However, Hayes criticized the full or partial mediation.
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me, Dr. Mostafa?
Yes, now
okay,
can.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Disconnect.
Yes, I was, I was disconnected because of the internet. Okay, so the question was that normally in the past when people were using a mediation, they would also go ahead and test or report full, partial, or no mediation. However, there's a criticism on this saying that it's a vague concept to say it's partial or full mediation. So what do you suggest?
Actually, VAF is not, it's similar to full and partial mediation. And I think based on the product of coefficient and significance of indirect effect is no more acceptable for assessment of mediator. For assessment of mediator, only we assess significance of indirect effect. And based on this significant, we can conclude this variable is mediator or not. And we can also compare mediator and indirect effect and direct effect in case of hypothesizing these effects and importance of this effect in our research. But recent literature no more suggests or recommend partial or full mediation.
Okay, perfect.
The recent literature actually is something for is based on competitive or complementary.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mostafa. The last question I'm going to ask you is because we're already past time. There's a temporal separation in mediation when A affects B and B affects C. However, data collection and analysis is conducted simultaneously, like at the same time. Is there any problem with that?
No, because actually temporal relationship is for happening phenomena. It's right. IV happened before mediator and mediator happened before DV, right? We have perception. Perception happened or attitude happened before satisfaction and satisfaction happened before loyalty, right? So phenomena happen with lag and sequence, right? But the time that we collect data and analyze data, maybe some of the phenomena already happened and some will happen in the future. So we will collect data for these different variables in different times. So there is not any issue. We can collect data and we can analyze it. But the relationship is, temporal relationship. We have a time lag for IV, mediator, and DV.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Mostafa. Many people ask about slides plus some of the papers that you mentioned about complementary and competitive mediator.
I will share with you later.
Okay. Yes. So for those of you who are asking, please check back the video description tomorrow. This video on YouTube. I'll add all the links in the video description so that you have access to these slides, as well as the additional literature that Dr. Mostafa recommends to read about mediation and moderation. In the end, I will say one thing to everybody who is watching or listening. This mediation, moderation, or anything related to statistics is also a discipline, just like other disciplines, right? Just like other academic disciplines, marketing, HR, organizational behavior, these are all academic disciplines that progress with the time. Theories come, theories change, they all develop, and then you proceed with those developments. So make sure that you follow the same developments with statistics and also with measurements and everything, because these things also change. Recently I reviewed a paper, and this paper used smart PLS, ignoring all the, latest developments in, smart PLS or even PLS literature. So then the reviewer has to say that you have to be in line with the recent developments in PLS or any other method that you are using. So my suggestion to everybody, especially PhD students, or even other seasoned researchers who are doing it, make sure that your analysis, your methodology is also following the recent debates in that method. That's my suggestion. Dr. Mostafa, any last words, anything that you may want to say?
Thank you. Hopefully that this was useful for all audiences and get something useful for their research. Thank you for this platform and for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. We may be doing this one in the future also, because I see that quite a few questions still went unanswered because the time is so limited. And this is an interesting discussion. So hopefully Dr. Mostafa will come back and answer some more questions in the future, maybe a month later or something. But thank you again so much for accepting my invitation and coming today to talk to all the audience on the channel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.